Is it true?
He is not your brother by blood.
20 years, Mama.
Obiora Nosu sits on a metal bench that has held better men than him, his ivory agbada now dark with sweat at the collar and under both arms. Across the narrow table, a police officer in a faded black uniform taps a slim brown folder against his palm, unhurried, the way a man taps a folder when he already knows the answer to the question he is about to ask.
We can't proceed until we confirm his identity.
There is no certificate. There was never a birth.
Cut across the city to a living room in Lekki, where the evening light slants gold through gauze curtains onto a coffee table, and a cup of tea has gone cold, a faint ring of Ngozi Nosu's lipstick still pressed against its rim. She stands at the window with her back to the room, her shoulders drawn up around her ears like a woman bracing for a blow that has already landed. Behind her, 3 of her daughters stand in a tight, unmoving line, arms crossed, faces carved from the same stone. A 4th sits folded into the couch, elbows on her knees, face buried in her palms, because Amaka already knows the answer. Amaka has known for 6 years. And on the staircase, half in shadow, 14-year-old Zainab grips the banister with both hands, too young to fully understand what is happening in this room, old enough to know, with a child's cruel clarity, that something in her family is breaking beyond repair. Kemi, is it true? Is it true that Daniel is not our brother? Sit down, Kemi. Answer me, Mama. For 20 years, you let us call him our brother. You let us share our food with him, share our home, share a love none of us ever got. And now the police are asking Papa for a birth certificate he cannot produce. So please, somebody in this house should explain to me why that is. Mrs. Nosu finally turned around. Her eyes were red, but her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. If you have ever been the child who held your family together while somebody else got to be celebrated for simply existing, drop a comment below and tell me which number child you are, because this story is about to break your heart in a way you will not see coming. Stay with me till the end, because what these 5 sisters do after this moment is the part nobody expects. Long before Daniel Nosu's name appeared on a Lagos newspaper headline as a fraud suspect, he was simply a 2-week-old baby wrapped in a green shawl, placed into the arms of a woman who had cried herself to sleep more nights than she could count. By the time Ngozi Nosu was 26, she had already given her husband 3 daughters, Amaka first, then Chioma, then Kemi, 3 girls in 5 years, and a body that had begun to fail her with every pregnancy after. When Kemi turned 2, a doctor in a small Enugu clinic sat Ngozi down and told her the words that would follow her for the rest of her life.
Mrs. Nwosu, your womb cannot safely carry another child. If you try again, you may not survive it.
She did not tell her husband that night, because in the Enosu family and in the wide watching umuna that surrounded them, a woman's worth was still measured by one thing: whether or not she could give her husband a son to carry his name. Obiora Nosu was the last surviving son of his father, and 3 daughters, however brilliant, however beloved, meant nothing to a man like his own mother, who reminded his son of it every visit. Obiora, a man without a son is a man without a future. You have 3 daughters warming your house, and not one of them can pour libation for you when you join your ancestors. She heard it from the kitchen, where she stood pretending to wash plates that were already clean. She heard it for 2 years straight, absorbed it, smiled through it, carried it home in her chest like a stone she was too ashamed to put down. The night her husband's mother finally said the words "second wife" out loud, something in Ngozi broke completely. Obiora, I cannot carry another pregnancy. The doctor said it will kill me. I know. Then what do we do? Sit here and let your mother bring another woman into my home? Obiora did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost afraid of itself. There is another way. A man at my office, his cousin runs a private home in Onitsha. No questions asked. We tell no one. We say you traveled to your sister's place in Owerri and we come back with a son. And nobody in this world needs to know the difference. Ngozi's hands went cold. That is a lie we would carry for the rest of our lives, Obiora. It is a lie that saves this family. Or would you rather I bring a second wife into this house? 3 weeks later, Ngozi Nwosu returned to Nnewi from a supposed trip to Owerri, carrying a 2-week-old baby boy wrapped in a green shawl. The whole compound came out to celebrate. Goats were slaughtered. A name was chosen with a pride that had never once been given to any of her daughters. Daniel. God is my judge. Nobody asked why Ngozi looked thinner than a woman who had just given birth. Joy, it turns out, makes people stop asking questions. And in that joy, 3 little girls stood quietly at the edge of the celebration, watching their mother hold a baby brother none of them had seen her carry. Amaka was 6 years old that day. She would not learn the full truth for another 20 years. But even at 6, some quiet part of her already understood that something about that afternoon did not add up. Here is the part that made everything so much harder to forgive later. 11 months after Daniel came into that house, Ngozi discovered she was pregnant. Against every warning her doctor had given her, against everything the family had built their entire lie upon, she carried the pregnancy to term and gave birth to a 4th daughter, Tolu, healthy, screaming, alive. 5 years after that, almost as if life itself was determined to prove a point nobody in that house wanted to hear, Ngozi conceived one final time and gave birth to Zainab. The very reason they gave for adopting Daniel, that Ngozi's body could never carry another child, had been disproven, not once, but twice. And still, Ngozi and Obiora did not tell the truth. If you already sense where this is going, you are right. But stay with me, because the way this favoritism quietly poisoned 5 different childhoods all at once is the part I think you need to hear. And I want to know in the comments if you have ever watched a family do this to one of their own. By the time the youngest 3 girls were old enough to understand anything, favoritism was no longer something whispered about. It was simply the weather of the house, the thing everybody breathed without remarking on it anymore. Amaka at 28 was the anchor of the entire family and had been for years. She worked a solid job in logistics and ran a small provisions business on the side that she had built from nothing. And every month, without fail, a portion of her salary quietly left her account and landed in her parents'. Nobody thanked her for it. It had simply become expected, the way rain is expected in July. Chioma, 25, and in her final year at university, was serious in the way people become when nobody has handed them anything easily. She was weeks from submitting her final project when she asked her father for 40,000 naira to cover binding, printing, and a data plan for her research. Her father told her to manage what she had. That same week, Daniel, who had failed to graduate and was drifting through a business idea his father kept funding, was given a brand new laptop, still wrapped in its box, sitting proudly on the center table for every visitor to admire. Kemi, 22, had just finished her degree and preparing for NYSC. And Kemi was the one who noticed things most sharply, because Kemi had spent her whole life quietly cataloging them. She noticed that when she needed money for her call-up documents and camp registration, her mother sighed and said things were tight. The following week, Daniel casually mentioned he needed money to impress a girl he was interested in, and her mother handed him 20,000 naira without blinking. Kemi said nothing out loud. She simply began to keep a mental list, the kind of list a person keeps when they have stopped expecting fairness and started expecting patterns instead. Tolu, 19, was in the middle of preparing for both JAMB and NECO, carrying the particular exhaustion of a teenager whose future felt entirely like it depended on exams nobody was helping her study for. She asked twice for extra lesson fees to attend a weekend tutorial her mates were all enrolling in. Twice, she was told to wait till next month. That same month, Daniel wrecked a car his father had financed for him, claimed it had been stolen, and was believed without a single follow-up question. And then there was Zainab, 14, still in secondary school, too young to name what she was saying, but not too young to feel it. She remembered winning a spelling competition and coming home eager to tell her parents, only to find the house already buzzing with excitement over Daniel supposedly landing a job interview, a job he would never actually attend. Her news sat quietly in her chest, unspoken, because there was simply no room left in the room for it. If any part of this feels painfully familiar, comment the word "seen" below, because I think a lot of you watching right now know exactly what it feels like to grow up unseen in your own home. And I want you to know you are not the only one. Years folded into each other the way they do in houses where nobody is paying close attention to anyone but one person. Daniel drifted from one funded venture to the next, each one collapsing quietly, each collapse absorbed by his father's savings, or more often a phone call to Amaka. Amaka, your brother is in a small trouble. Just this one time, help him with 300,000 naira, and we will not bother you again. She always sent it. She had been sending it in one form or another since she was in her early 20s, back when the amounts were smaller and the excuses were simpler. What none of her sisters knew, what she had never told a single soul, was that 6 years earlier, while helping her mother clear out an old metal box during a house renovation, Amaka had found an adoption certificate with Daniel's name on it, dated the year she turned 6. She had stared at it for almost an hour that afternoon. Her first instinct was to confront her mother right there. Her second instinct, the one that eventually won, was fear. Fear of what the truth would do to a family already this unevenly held together. So she folded the certificate back into the box exactly as she found it, and she carried the secret to Lagos with her where it sat in her chest like a second heartbeat for 6 long years, through every transfer she sent, every excuse she absorbed, every family gathering where somebody's name was celebrated first and it was never hers. Daniel, for his part, grew into exactly the kind of man a house built entirely around him will eventually produce. At 20, he had already dropped out of university, already burnt through 2 business ventures his father funded, and had recently taken to disappearing for days at a time with vague talk of a new opportunity involving forex trading. When Kemi, the sister who noticed everything, gently asked him where the money for his new phone had come from, Daniel laughed in her face.
Sister, relax now. Is it not one family? What is mine is yours, and what is yours is also mine.
Their father laughed along with him. Their mother said nothing at all. Kemi went to her room that night and for the first time in years allowed herself to cry. Not over the phone, but over the laughter that followed his answer, laughter that told her, once again, exactly where she stood. The trouble that finally ended everything began on an ordinary Thursday afternoon in Lekki, when a 61-year-old widow named Mrs. Patience Adeyemi walked into a police station shaking with rage, holding a folder of bank transfer receipts totaling 8,300,000 naira. She told the officers a story that has become painfully common in this city. A young man named Daniel had presented himself as an investment consultant with access to a lucrative forex platform. He had shown charts, testimonials, screenshots of returns other clients had supposedly received. She trusted him because he reminded her of her late son. Over 4 months, she transferred her entire retirement savings into an account he controlled, and when she finally asked to withdraw her profits, his number stopped working. It took the police 11 days to trace and arrest Daniel Nwosu at a hotel in Victoria Island, where he had been living lavishly off money that was never his. And it was there, during processing, when officers asked for identification to confirm his full legal name and date of birth, that the first crack appeared. "Sir, we need your birth certificate or your national ID to proceed." "I don't have it on me, my father has it." "Then we will need your father to bring it along with your original hospital birth record before we can process bail." Obiora arrived 2 hours later, sweating through his agbada. And it was there, in a fluorescent lit waiting room, that he understood the lie he had built 20 years earlier was about to collapse in the worst possible way. There was no hospital birth record for Daniel Nwosu. There had never been one. A records officer, doing nothing more than routine verification, made one phone call to the private facility in Onitsha that had long since changed hands and confirmed what Obiora had spent 2 decades hiding. The child had been adopted, not born. "Somebody call Amaka." It was Obiora himself who said it, his voice breaking in a police station corridor, because even in his panic, he knew Amaka was the only one strong enough to hold what was about to fall apart. Which brings us back to that living room in Lagos. Kemi and Chioma standing in stunned silence, Tolu pale by the window, Zainab frozen on the staircase, Amaka sitting with her face in her hands, and a mother finally admitting out loud the truth her eldest daughter had carried alone for 6 long years. Chioma found her voice first, and when it came, it cracked halfway through. 20 years, Mama. 20 years watching you and Papa give that boy everything while the rest of us manage leftovers. I begged for 40,000 naira for my final year project and was told to manage. Kemi's NYSC fees were too much trouble, but Daniel's laptop came wrapped in a box like a birthday gift. Tolu is sitting for JAMB right now with no extra lessons because there was never enough money, and yet somehow there was always enough for him. Chioma, you don't understand what your father and I went through. Then make me understand, Mama, because from where I'm standing, you looked at 3 daughters your body actually gave you, decided we were not enough, and went out to replace us. And then after all that, you had Tolu, and then you had Zainab, 2 more daughters born straight into that same lie, and you still could not find it in yourselves to treat any of us the way you treated him. Kemi finally spoke, her voice low and steady in a way that was somehow more devastating than shouting. I used to think I was imagining it. I used to think maybe I was just a jealous sister, keeping score for no reason. But I wasn't imagining anything, was I? I was simply the only one paying attention. Nobody answered her. Tolu, standing by the window, finally turned around, her eyes wet but her voice fierce. I am 19 years old, about to write exams that will decide my whole future, and I have spent the last 2 months being told there is no money for lessons. Do you know how that feels, Mama? To watch somebody get everything while you are told to manage, and then find out he was never even entitled to any of it in the first place? And Zainab, 14 years old, still standing on the staircase, asked the one question that finally broke whatever composure was left in the room. This means I was never enough either? Is that why nobody ever cared about my spelling trophy? Ngozi crossed the room and pulled her youngest daughter into her arms, sobbing now, unable to answer, because there was no answer that would not confirm exactly what Zainab already suspected. Amaka finally lifted her head. Her eyes were dry, the tears having exhausted themselves an hour earlier, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it silenced the entire room. I found the certificate 6 years ago, Mama, during the renovation, in the metal box. I have known since I was 22 that Daniel was not my brother by blood, and I said nothing. Do you want to know why? Nobody moved. Because I was afraid of exactly this moment. I was afraid the truth would break this family apart, so I carried it alone instead. I paid his debts. I fixed his mistakes. I let everyone believe I was simply the responsible one, when really I was protecting a lie that was never mine to protect. And the part that will sit with me for the rest of my life is that while I protected it, my sisters kept being told in 100 quiet ways that they mattered less than a boy who was never even blood in a house he only belonged in because Mama and Papa were too proud to undo a lie once biology had already proven it unnecessary. Ngozi sank into the nearest chair, her whole body shaking. I only wanted your father to stay. I only wanted this family together. Do you know what they call a woman who cannot give her husband a son in that village? I was drowning, Amaka. I made a choice to save myself. And when Tolu came, and then Zainab, I was too ashamed to admit what I had already done. I am sorry. I am so sorry that in trying to save myself, I let all of you drown instead. Obiora stood by the door, saying nothing at all, and for the first time in his life, none of his daughters were interested in what he had to say. If you have ever had to protect a secret that was slowly poisoning you from the inside, comment the words "I understand" below, because Amaka's silence is a kind of pain too many first daughters in African homes carry quietly, and it deserves to be spoken about more. Daniel was released on bail 11 days later after his father sold a plot of family land in Newi to cover a portion of Mrs. Adeyemi's stolen savings, a portion that still left the widow permanently short of what she needed for her retirement. He returned to a family that would never look at him the same way again, not because he was adopted. That fact alone had never been the true wound, but because of everything that adoption had come to represent. 20 years of being told, without a single word ever needing to be spoken, that he mattered more than 5 girls who had done nothing except be born the wrong gender twice over, even after biology itself had already given the family the daughters it swore it could never have. The confrontation that followed was quieter than anyone expected, and somehow that quiet made it heavier. It was Kemi, the sister who spent her whole life keeping score in silence, who finally said what all 5 of them had been circling for weeks. "I don't hate you for being adopted, Daniel. That was never your fault. But I hate what this family let you become. Nobody ever said no to you, and now you are 20 years old sitting in this house because you defrauded a widow of her retirement, and somehow some part of you still expected one of us to fix it." Daniel had no answer. For perhaps the first time in his life, nobody rushed to defend him. It was Amaka who finally set the terms for what remained of the family. She gathered her sisters, all 4 of them, in her Lekki apartment 3 weeks after the arrest, and said the thing none of them had dared to say out loud. "I am done paying for a family structure I was never told the truth about. I will always love our mother, and I understand now some of what drove her to that decision, even if I do not agree with it. But I am done being the invisible foundation this family stands on, while somebody else gets to be the roof everyone admires. From today, I am not funding Daniel's mistakes anymore. And I think, if we are honest, none of us should be either." Chioma nodded slowly. Kemi nodded too, the way a person nods when a weight finally leaves their chest. Tolu wiped her eyes and managed a small, tired smile. And Zainab, still the youngest, still learning what all of this meant, was the one who finally said the words that tied the whole moment together. "I think for the first time, I actually feel like your sister, all of you, not just the small one standing behind a brother everyone loved more. You are always my sister, Zainab. All of you are always my sisters. I am just sorry it took something this painful for me to finally say it the way you deserved to hear it." The months that followed were not a fairy tale ending, because real families rarely get those. Obiora and Nogozi spent a long season in silence, heavier than any argument, the kind that comes from finally seeing your own choices reflected back at you by the people you hurt the most. Nogozi eventually wrote each of her daughters a letter, 5 separate letters, admitting things she had never had the courage to say out loud, admitting that fear had made her a mother who loved unevenly, and asking not for forgiveness she felt she deserved, but simply for the chance to try again, honestly this time. Daniel left Lagos for almost a year, staying with a distant relative in Asaba, working an ordinary job for the first time in his life, a job nobody had handed to him. When he returned, he was quieter, humbler, the entitlement slowly wearing off under the weight of consequences he could no longer outrun. And the 5 sisters, Amaka, Chioma, Kemi, Tolu, and Zainab, did something none of them had ever truly allowed themselves to do before. They chose themselves. Amaka finally began keeping more of what she earned, building toward a life she had spent a decade postponing. Chioma submitted her final year project on time, funded entirely by her sisters this time, and graduated with distinction. Kemi went on to her service year lighter than she had felt in years, no longer keeping score because there was finally nothing left worth counting. Tolu sat her exams with proper lessons paid for, not by her parents, but by 4 sisters who had decided nobody in that house would ever again be told to manage. And Zainab, still just 14, started bringing her school trophies straight to Amaka's apartment first, because that, she had quietly decided, was where they would actually be celebrated. That December, the 5 of them started a tradition, just the sisters, gathered at Amaka's place the night before Christmas, toasting to a bond that somehow survived 20 years of being told it mattered less. Zainab, the baby of the house, raised her cup of Chapman that night and said the words that would become, for all 5 of them, something close to a family motto. We were never each other's competition. We were just too busy being compared to notice we were always on the same side. So let me ask you this before you go. If you were Amaka, would you have kept that secret for 6 years to protect your family, or would you have exposed it the moment you found the certificate? Tell me honestly in the comments, because I have seen this story play out in real homes more times than I can count, and I want to know exactly where you stand. And if this story hit close to home, if you know exactly what it feels like to be the child who works while somebody else gets celebrated, I think you're going to want to watch the story playing right there on your screen right now, because that family secret goes even deeper than this one, and trust me, you do not want to miss how it ends.